When someone younger begins to love deeply, the experience often becomes more than a simple emotional connection. It turns into a quiet journey of identity. At a younger stage of life, the personality is still forming its direction, values, and emotional balance. Because of this, love is not only felt toward another person, but also reflected inward as a search for meaning. The younger heart naturally gives fully, without yet understanding how to protect its emotional energy. Every conversation feels significant, every small change feels noticeable, and every moment of closeness feels like confirmation of purpose. This intensity does not come from immaturity alone. It comes from emotional openness. Without the emotional layers that time gradually builds, the feeling flows freely and deeply. Yet this depth can create internal pressure. The individual may begin to question whether they are strong enough to carry such meaningful attachment while still discovering who they are. Love then becomes both comfort and challenge, bringing warmth while also awakening emotional responsibility. As the connection grows stronger, the younger individual may notice a subtle inner conflict forming. On one side, there is a desire to remain close to the person who brings emotional clarity and reassurance. On the other side, there is an emerging need for independence and personal growth. These two forces do not oppose each other, yet they can feel difficult to balance. The younger heart may fear that change could weaken the connection, while at the same time sensing that growth is necessary. This emotional tension is a natural part of psychological development. Through it, the individual slowly learns that deep love does not require losing personal identity. Instead, it encourages emotional awareness and inner stability. Moments of doubt become lessons in understanding emotional boundaries, and moments of closeness become reminders of trust. Over time, what first felt overwhelming begins to organize into clarity. The emotional experience transforms from uncertainty into maturity, showing that deep love is not only about attachment, but also about becoming stronger within oneself. When a younger person begins to love with great depth, the emotion often reaches beyond ordinary affection and enters the realm of inner transformation. At this stage of life, feelings are closely connected to self-discovery, which means love does not remain limited to the relationship itself. It begins to influence how the individual sees their future, their worth, and their emotional direction. Because their identity is still developing, the connection may feel unusually powerful, almost as if it carries meaning that cannot easily be explained. The younger heart may interpret the bond as something rare and life-defining, and this belief increases emotional intensity. However, such depth can also create emotional strain. When expectations and reality do not always move at the same pace, the individual may experience quiet confusion. They might wonder why small emotional shifts affect them so strongly, or why moments of distance feel heavier than expected. This happens because deep attachment activates both hope and vulnerability at the same time. Without long emotional experience to provide balance, the heart tries to hold everything at once. Yet within this pressure lies an important psychological process. The individual begins learning emotional awareness, discovering that love is not only about closeness, but also about emotional steadiness and patience. As the relationship continues to influence their inner world, the younger individual may feel a growing responsibility toward the connection. They begin to notice their reactions more carefully, reflecting on their words, their emotions, and their fears. Love starts to act like a mirror, revealing strengths as well as insecurities that were previously unnoticed. This reflection can feel intense because it introduces emotional truths that require maturity. The individual may feel torn between the desire to remain emotionally open and the need to protect themselves from imagined loss. In this stage, emotional growth becomes unavoidable. The experience teaches that strong feelings must be supported by inner balance, Gradually, the individual learns that deep love does not demand perfection, but awareness. They begin to understand that emotional stability grows through patience rather than urgency. What once felt overwhelming slowly becomes meaningful guidance. The connection no longer feels like emotional weight alone. It becomes a source of personal development. Through reflection and time, the younger heart realizes that love is not tearing them apart, but quietly shaping them into a stronger and more self-aware version of themselves. Deep emotional attachment in a younger heart often begins quietly, yet it grows with surprising intensity because it connects not only to affection, but also to inner imagination. At a younger stage of emotional development, feelings are experienced with openness and very little emotional filtering. This allows love to move freely through thoughts, dreams, and personal expectations. The individual may begin to associate the relationship with direction and emotional meaning, sensing that the connection is shaping who they are becoming. Because identity is still forming, the loved person may appear as both companion and emotional anchor. This creates a powerful psychological bond, but it can also generate inner tension. The younger individual may feel uncertain about how much of themselves to give and how much to preserve for personal growth. Small emotional changes may feel larger than they truly are, not because the connection is unstable, but because the emotional world is still learning balance. In such moments, the heart may interpret intensity as fragility, even though the experience is actually guiding emotional expansion. The pressure they feel is not the result of weakness. It is the natural response to caring deeply while still learning emotional structure. As this depth continues to grow, reflection becomes unavoidable. The younger person begins noticing how strongly their mood responds to the presence or absence of reassurance. They may question their reactions, wondering why their thoughts return so often to the connection. This repeated reflection slowly introduces emotional awareness. Love begins to reveal hidden insecurities while also strengthening emotional sensitivity. The individual may feel torn between trust and fear, between emotional closeness and the possibility of change. Yet this inner conflict carries an important purpose. It encourages the development of emotional independence without losing emotional sincerity. Over time, the younger heart starts to understand that deep love is not meant to remove uncertainty entirely, but to teach stability within it. The emotional experience becomes less overwhelming as understanding replaces assumption. What once felt like emotional struggle begins transforming into emotional clarity. Through patience and honest reflection, the individual recognizes that the intensity was never there to break them. It was there to deepen self-awareness and guide them toward a stronger emotional foundation that will support both love and personal growth. When deep love forms in a younger heart, it often arrives before emotional structure has fully matured, and this timing creates a powerful inner movement. The feeling is genuine and sincere, yet the individual may not fully understand how to carry such emotional depth with steadiness. At this stage of life, emotions are closely connected to imagination and personal meaning. The younger person may begin to see the relationship not only as companionship, but also as a symbol of direction and emotional belonging. Because their sense of identity is still evolving, the connection can feel larger than expected. Every interaction seems significant, and every emotional shift may feel personal. This intensity does not arise from exaggeration but from openness. Without the protective experience that time gradually builds, the heart responds fully and immediately. However, this openness can also create emotional strain. The individual may begin to worry about change, distance, or the possibility of losing what feels deeply meaningful. These thoughts quietly introduce inner tension. Yet within this tension lies an important psychological process. The younger heart is learning emotional balance, discovering that strong connection must exist alongside personal stability. Love is not only giving warmth, it is shaping emotional awareness. As emotional awareness grows, the younger individual begins to notice subtle changes within their inner world. They reflect more carefully on their reactions, their expectations, and their fears. Love starts to act like a mirror, revealing emotional patterns that were previously unnoticed. This reflection may feel overwhelming at times because it introduces emotional responsibility. The individual may feel torn between holding tightly to the connection and allowing themselves to grow naturally. They may wonder whether personal change could affect the relationship or whether emotional independence might create distance. These concerns are not signs of emotional weakness. They are signs of emotional development. Through such moments, the individual gradually learns that deep love does not require losing oneself. Instead, it encourages clarity and inner strength. With patience, emotional intensity begins to organize into understanding. The fear of emotional loss slowly transforms into trust, and uncertainty becomes self-awareness. What once felt like emotional pressure begins to reveal purpose. The younger heart realizes that the experience is not tearing them apart, but gently reshaping their emotional foundation, preparing them to carry both love and identity with greater balance and maturity. When a younger person experiences deep love, the emotion often moves beyond simple attraction and begins shaping their inner world in subtle yet powerful ways. At an earlier stage of emotional development, feelings are experienced with sincerity and openness without the steady emotional framework that usually comes through time and experience. Because of this, the connection may feel larger than expected, almost as if it carries personal meaning that reaches into identity itself. The younger individual may begin to connect their sense of worth, direction, and emotional security to the relationship, not out of dependence but out of emotional intensity. Every moment of closeness can feel deeply reassuring, while moments of uncertainty may feel heavier than they truly are. This emotional contrast creates internal pressure, where joy and fear exist side by side. The heart wants to trust completely, yet the mind quietly questions whether such depth can remain stable. This inner tension is not a sign that the love is fragile. Rather, it reflects the natural process of emotional growth. When feelings become strong, they begin to reveal emotional patterns that were previously unnoticed. The individual starts to observe their reactions more carefully, becoming aware of how deeply connection influences their emotional state. As this awareness continues to develop, the younger person may feel as though they are changing from within. Love begins to act like a reflective surface, showing both emotional strengths and hidden insecurities. They may notice moments where reassurance feels necessary, or moments where small misunderstandings seem emotionally significant. These experiences are not obstacles but lessons in emotional balance. The individual gradually learns that deep love requires not only sincerity but also inner stability. They begin to understand that emotional closeness does not mean losing personal identity, and that personal growth does not weaken genuine connection. Through reflection, patience, and emotional honesty, the intensity that once felt overwhelming slowly becomes meaningful guidance. The fear of emotional loss starts to transform into emotional trust, and uncertainty begins turning into self-awareness. What once felt like emotional strain reveals itself as emotional shaping. The younger heart is not being torn apart. It is learning how to carry depth with strength. Over time, the experience settles into clarity, allowing love to remain sincere while identity grows stronger, creating a balance where connection and self-understanding exist together peacefully. When deep love enters the life of a younger person, it often awakens emotional layers that were quietly forming beneath everyday awareness. At this stage, the personality is still shaping its understanding of stability, independence, and emotional direction. Because of this, love does not remain a simple feeling. It becomes an experience that influences how the individual sees themselves and their future. The younger heart may begin to invest meaning into every interaction, interpreting closeness as reassurance and silence as uncertainty. This sensitivity grows not from weakness but from emotional openness. Without years of experience to soften emotional reactions, the feelings move directly through the inner world with great intensity. The connection may feel rare and deeply important, which increases the desire to protect it. Yet this desire can also create internal pressure. The individual may question whether they are strong enough to carry such depth while still discovering their own identity. In these moments, love begins to act as a quiet teacher. It introduces emotional responsibility and encourages reflection. What first feels overwhelming slowly reveals itself as part of emotional development, guiding the younger heart toward balance rather than emotional dependence. As reflection deepens, the younger individual begins to notice how strongly their emotional state connects to their thoughts about the relationship. They may become more aware of their reactions, observing moments of reassurance as well as moments of doubt. This awareness can feel intense because it introduces emotional honesty. The individual may realize that deep love requires more than feeling. It requires understanding. They start learning that emotional closeness must exist alongside personal stability, and that genuine connection does not demand constant certainty. At times, they may feel torn between holding tightly to the bond and allowing themselves to grow naturally. However, this inner tension carries an important purpose. It helps transform emotional intensity into emotional maturity. Gradually, the fear of losing connection becomes replaced by trust in emotional resilience. The younger heart begins to understand that love is not meant to remove all uncertainty, but to strengthen the ability to remain steady within it. Through patience and self-awareness, what once felt like emotional strain turns into clarity. The experience stops feeling like it is pulling them apart and instead becomes a process that strengthens both their sense of self and their ability to love with deeper balance. When a younger person begins to love with unusual depth, the emotion often reaches beyond ordinary attachment and begins shaping their inner awareness. At an early stage of emotional development, feelings are experienced with sincerity and intensity because the personality is still forming its sense of balance and direction. The connection may feel meaningful in ways that are difficult to explain, as if it carries a quiet sense of purpose. The younger heart may start linking this relationship with their identity, seeing the bond not only as companionship but also as emotional guidance. Because experience has not yet fully strengthened emotional boundaries, every moment of closeness can feel deeply reassuring, while small uncertainties may feel larger than they truly are. This contrast creates an inner movement where hope and fear exist together. The individual may question their reactions, wondering why the connection affects them so strongly. Yet this intensity is not a sign of emotional instability. It reflects emotional openness. Deep love begins revealing hidden sensitivities and unrecognized emotional needs, encouraging the individual to observe themselves more carefully. What feels overwhelming at first is often the beginning of emotional awareness, where the heart starts learning how to carry meaningful connection while still developing personal strength. As time passes, reflection becomes a natural part of the experience. The younger individual begins to notice subtle emotional patterns within themselves. They may recognize moments where reassurance brings calmness and moments where uncertainty brings restlessness. This awareness introduces emotional responsibility. Love begins to feel less like a simple emotion and more like a process that requires patience and understanding. At times, the individual may feel torn between staying emotionally close and protecting their personal growth. They may fear that change within themselves could affect the relationship, yet they also sense that growth cannot be avoided. This inner tension carries an important purpose. It teaches that deep love does not require losing individuality but strengthening it. Through reflection, the emotional intensity gradually becomes clearer and more balanced. The younger heart starts understanding that stability does not come from controlling every outcome, but from developing inner calm. What once felt like emotional pressure slowly transforms into emotional clarity. The experience reveals that the depth of love was never there to weaken them. It was guiding them toward maturity, helping them build a stronger emotional foundation where connection and self-understanding can exist together with quiet confidence. When deep love develops within a younger heart, it often arrives with a sense of emotional discovery that feels both inspiring and unsettling. At this stage of life, feelings are closely connected to imagination and personal meaning, so the relationship may appear larger than its visible form. The younger individual may begin to interpret the connection as a sign of direction, emotional belonging, or inner purpose. Because their identity is still shaping itself, the presence of someone meaningful can influence how they see their future and their sense of worth. This emotional openness allows affection to grow quickly and sincerely, yet it also increases sensitivity. Small emotional changes may feel significant, and moments of uncertainty may appear heavier than expected. The individual may wonder why their thoughts return repeatedly to the connection, or why reassurance feels so important. This does not happen because the love is fragile, but because the emotional structure that supports such depth is still developing. The heart is learning how to hold powerful feelings without becoming overwhelmed by them. In this process, love begins to reveal emotional patterns that were previously unnoticed, gently encouraging self-awareness and inner reflection. As reflection deepens, the younger person may start recognizing that love is not only about emotional closeness, but also about emotional balance. They may observe how their mood shifts with expectation, memory, or imagination, and this awareness introduces a new level of emotional responsibility. The connection becomes a mirror where strengths and insecurities appear together. At times, they may feel torn between the desire to hold tightly to the relationship and the quiet understanding that personal growth must continue. This inner tension can feel intense because it asks the individual to mature emotionally while still experiencing sincere attachment. However, this pressure carries meaningful purpose. It teaches patience, emotional steadiness, and the ability to separate imagined fears from real emotional signals. Gradually, the younger heart begins to understand that deep love does not require constant certainty. Instead, it requires trust in both the connection and personal resilience. What once felt like emotional strain slowly transforms into emotional clarity. The experience reveals that the depth of feeling was not there to create confusion, but to strengthen identity, helping the individual learn how to remain emotionally open while also becoming inwardly stable and self-aware. When a younger person carries deep love within their heart, the emotion often becomes intertwined with their evolving sense of identity. At this stage of life, feelings are not yet separated from personal meaning, so the relationship may begin to influence how they see themselves and their emotional future. The connection feels significant because it arrives during a time when the inner world is still forming structure and direction. The younger individual may notice that their thoughts return frequently to the bond, not out of distraction but out of emotional investment. Every moment of closeness feels encouraging, while small uncertainties may feel unusually heavy. This contrast creates a quiet inner tension where hope and vulnerability exist together. The heart wants to trust fully, yet the mind continues searching for reassurance. Such emotional movement is natural because strong attachment often awakens deeper psychological layers. The individual begins to recognize emotional needs that were previously unnoticed. They may question why the connection affects their mood so strongly, or why emotional distance feels difficult to interpret. These reflections are not signs of emotional weakness. They are signs that awareness is expanding. Love, in this form, becomes more than companionship. It begins shaping emotional understanding and encouraging the development of inner balance. As emotional awareness grows, the younger person gradually realizes that deep love requires both sincerity and stability. They start observing their reactions more carefully, noticing how expectation, imagination, and memory influence their emotional state. This realization introduces responsibility, not toward controlling the relationship, but toward understanding themselves. At times, they may feel torn between holding tightly to the connection and allowing personal growth to unfold naturally. They may worry that change could alter emotional closeness, yet they also sense that growth cannot be avoided. This inner conflict carries an important purpose. It teaches that genuine connection does not demand emotional perfection, but emotional maturity. Through patience and reflection, the intensity that once felt overwhelming begins to settle into clarity. The younger heart starts understanding that stability comes from within rather than from constant reassurance. Emotional depth then transforms into emotional strength. What once felt like emotional strain reveals itself as emotional shaping. The experience is not pulling them apart. It is guiding them toward a stronger identity where love and self-awareness can exist together. Over time, the connection becomes less about fear of loss and more about trust in emotional resilience, allowing the individual to carry deep affection with calm understanding.